Hello, I'm Dr. Jane Peterson with the Human Systems Institute. This is a series of short videos looking at different aspects of organizational behavior and how organizational constellation work can be helpful. If you're a consultant or a coach, if you're a business owner or an executive, I think you'll find some helpful insights here. Today's topic is making decisions. One of the big things leaders have to do in organizations nowadays is make sometimes very difficult decisions in the face of very complex systems. So I'm going to switch to my slides right now just to be able to give you a quick glimpse into some ways of thinking about that situation. So a lot of times when we're making a decision, we feel like we're caught between the carrot and the stick. On the one hand, there are the reasons we're wanting to make that decision. There's the things that we're hoping to gain by the decision. On the other hand, there's a lot of risk. If you're a leader, that pitchfork can be pretty big. And so making good decisions, making wise decisions is an essential part of that role. It would be a lot easier if organizations were simple and we could make a decision and know what would happen. But our organizations today are often very complex. They operate like complex systems, nonlinear. They're governed by things like feedback loops, emergent behavior, sudden tipping points, effects of initial conditions that don't show up until quite a bit later, and synergistic effects that we can't predict. In fact, sometimes our systems are so complex that in the field of science that defines complexity, they're called a wicked mess. And I'm sure a number of leaders have felt like they're facing a wicked mess when they're trying to make decisions about what do we do and where do we go, what's important. A problem that we face is that we're not actually designed for complex systems thinking. It's really a different way of thinking than we're sort of natively trained for. As small children, we learn the world based on cause and effect linkages. So when we see the milk go in the glass and the volume go up, we learn that more is up. And we build a whole set of what one theorist, in fact, the link is here on the bottom, George Lakoff calls frames. And these are the basic building blocks that we use to understand how the world works and understand how to think about the world. Even when we make a metaphor, such as love is a journey or life is a journey, it's based in our physical experience of being on a journey, taking steps, things happen. There's ups and downs, there's events that occur. So this way of thinking isn't really so well matched to the kinds of challenges that we're facing today. So when you're making a decision, it's sometimes quite difficult to get a sense of the whole system that you're going to affect by the decision that you make. So in face of this complexity, and I've been a manager inside an organization as well, so I know how this goes, we often just make a gut decision. We make our best gut decision. We have the sort of sense about what we should do, and then we rationalize it. And we live with the consequences. And sometimes what we think we should do and what our gut's telling us aren't the same. It can be a very stressful situation. And of course, we're also dealing with other people as well. So we need a different way to make decisions. We need a way to get a better view that incorporates both what our head knows, our ways of thinking about things, and our gut sense of what's going on in our organization. Most of us have that kind of felt sense of like what's really going on, what I call the informal organizational chart. So one way for us to get at that is by mapping the social field. This is what your gut or your heart wants to tell your head, your thinking mind. So there's kind of two ways we have of making sense and making meaning in the world. One of those is the story-making mind, the part of us that thinks about things that have happened or about things that are going to happen, and puts together ideas about those, tells a story about what happened, what's going to happen, what we should do. Then there's the experiencing body-mind. This is the part of us that is in the moment. You know, perhaps it's noticing the frown on your boss and your coworkers' faces. Perhaps you are having tension in your gut as a result of that. All of this kind of stuff is happening, but not necessarily making it to explicit memory. So our body self experiences you in relationship. It experiences you as being in relationship with others and your world. The story-making mind that thinks about those experiences does so usually after the fact, or is making up a story about what you think you saw and experienced and telling you what to do and what will happen next. So these two ways of thinking and knowing are kind of separated from each other. Unfortunately, they both have really valuable information for us. That part of us that's just living and experiencing life day to day is kind of storing up a felt sense, a response to what's going on in our world. And it's kind of doing that in a sense of relationship with others. So it's got a kind of systemic way of knowing. The story mind, however, is the part that we task with figuring out what to do and making decisions. So very often our decisions reflect only what half of us knows. It doesn't really take into account all the wisdom of our felt and experiencing self. So in constellation work, what we're doing is actually mapping the social field. We're using the body's way of knowing itself in relationship, using a spatial relational language to allow us to show what we know, to actually put symbols or people in places in relationship to each other, to show what we can sense but perhaps have not captured in conscious memory. Memory, which we could spend many short videos on, is a very tricky thing. So just by taking what we're feeling and putting it into concrete terms, we give ourselves a new perspective. And then there's one other thing we do that's really helpful. We put a representative up for ourselves. So for the first time, we get to look at ourselves in relationship to the situation and the others that we might be engaged in this particular case. So we can see not only our influence, but the impact others have on us as well. And from this perspective, we begin to see the pattern rather than the story. Once we can see pattern, then our mind's ability to imagine and plan becomes useful. Then the mind is in service. And that's a better way for us to work for the most part. So organizational constellations allow us to actually kind of see nonlinear effects, to see what's emerging in our field. So this is an example of a case I did for a small company. They were trying to take on new products, and they were engaged in some new customers as well. They were trying to expand, and they were finding themselves really kind of bumping into each other and having problems. There were a lot of some difficult feelings as well. So I set up a very simple grid. After listening to them, I just put down 4 of the major aspects that any company has to deal with, which is governance. Where are we going? Who gets what? Who does what? Legal, finance. How do we deal with the requirements of the culture that we're part of? Operations on the other side here. What are we doing? How are we making a product if we're doing a product? And then finally, sales and product delivery, customer service. Then I had them stand, just follow their the body experience of where they spent most of their time and where they felt they needed to make a contribution. What happened was almost everyone stood in the sales department area, including the executive management. So everyone was actually in sales, and no one was actually kind of steering the boat. And as a consequence of seeing this so clearly, they went back and clarified their vision, clarified their mission, streamlined some of their operations. They were able to see what was emerging in their concern about these new products, about the urge to grow. So that enabled them to make some shifts from a very simple little activity that engaged the body experiencing self as well as the story-making mind. So I will be offering an online training program beginning July 12th. If you sign up by June 30th, you save money. So we'll be teaching organizational constellations online, and the link is right there, and I hope you can join us so that you can do something fun and important for you during your summer. Thank you so much.